Hello, today's daily reading comes from the book of the Apocrypha. We are reading from 2nd Maccabees, chapter 9, and it reads as follows. Now, about that time it befell that Antiochus had returned in disorder from the region of Persia, for he had entered into the city called Persepolis, and he essayed to rob a temple and to hold down the city, whereupon there was an onset of the multitudes, and Antiochus and his men turned to make defense with arms, and it came to pass that Antiochus was put to flight by the people of the country, and broke up his camp with disgrace. And while he was at Ecbatana, news was brought him what had happened to Nicanor and the forces of Timotheus. And being lifted up by his passion, he thought to make the Jews suffer evil, even for the evil doing of those that had put him to rout. For that reason, the judgment from heaven, even now accompanying him, he gave order to his charioteer to drive without ceasing and dispatch the journey. For so he arrogantly spoke, I will make Jerusalem a common graveyard of Jews when I come there. But the all seeing Lord, the God of Israel, struck him with a fatal and invisible stroke. And as soon as he ceased speaking this word, an incurable pain of the bowels seized him, and bitter torments of the inner parts, and that most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange sufferings. But he is no wise ceased from his rude insolence. No, still more was the filled with arrogance, breathing fire in his passion against the Jews, and commanding to haste the journey. But it came to pass, moreover, that he fell from his chariot as it rushed along, and having a grievous fall, was racked in all the members of his body, and that he but now supposed himself to have the waves of the sea at his bidding. So vainglorious was he beyond the condition of a man, and that thought to weigh the heights of the mountains in a balance was now brought to the ground and carried in a litter, showing to all that the power was manifestly God's, so that out of the body of the impious man worms swarmed, and while he was still living in anguish and pains, his flesh fell off. And by reason of the stench of the army turned with loathing from his corruption. And the man that a little before supposed himself to touch the stars of heaven, no one can endure to carry for his intolerable stench. Therefore he began in great part to cease from his arrogance, being broken in spirit, and to come to knowledge under the scourge of God, his pains increasing every moment. And when he himself could not stand his own smell, he said these words, It is right to be subject to God, and that one who is mortal should not be inclined arrogantly. And the vile man vowed to the sovereign Lord, who now no one would have pity upon him, saying on this wise, that the holy city, to the which he was going in haste, to lay it even with the ground, and to make it a common graveyard, he would declare free. And as touching the Jews, whom he had decided not even to count worthy of burial, but to cast them out of the beast with their infants for the birds to devour, he would make them all equal to citizens of Athens. In the holy sanctuary, which before he had plundered, he would adorn with goody offerings, and would restore all the sacred vessels many times multiplied, and out of his own revenues would defray the charges that were required for the sacrifices. And beside all this, that he would become a Jew and would visit every inhabited place, publishing abroad the might of God. But when his sufferings did in no wise cease, for the judgment of God had come upon him in righteousness, having given up all hope of himself, he wrote to the Jews a letter written below, having the nature of a supplication, to the effect, to the worthy Jews, his fellow citizens, Antiochus, king and general, wishes much joy and health and prosperity. May you and your children fare well, and your affairs will be to your mind. Having my hope in heaven, I remembered with affection your honor and goodwill toward me. Returning out of the region of Persia, and being taken with a noisome sickness, I deemed it necessary to take thought for the common safety of all, not despairing of myself, but having great hope to escape from the sickness. But considering that my father also, at what time he led an army into the upper country, appointed his successor to that end of that, if anything fell out contrary to expectation, or if any unwelcome tidings were brought, that they remained in the country, knowing to whom the state had been left, might not be troubled, And besides all this, observing how that the princes that are borderers and neighbors to my kingdom watch opportunities and look for the future event, I have appointed my son Antiochus to be king, whom I often committed and commended to most of you, when I was hastening to the upper provinces, and I have written to him what is written below. I exhort you therefore and implore you, having your remembrance the benefits done to you in common and severally, to preserve each of you your present goodwill toward me and my son. For I am persuaded that he in gentleness and kindness will follow my purpose and treat you with indulgence. So the murderer and blasphemer, having endured the most intense sufferings, even as he had dealt with other men, ended his life among the mountains by a most piteous fate in a strange land. And Philip, his foster brother, son of Antiochus, he betook himself to Ptolemy Philometor in Egypt. Amen.